Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's program. Welcome to tonight's program, Let's Get Real with Coach Menachem. Tonight is our 53rd shir, and we're all thankful to be here. Again, I want to thank everybody who is part of this platform and part of this program. We have our weeklies, and people are, keep on calling me all week, and they're posting on the WhatsApp, and they're emailing people, and they're telling people about it. And this is growing to a very large, powerful platform. And every week they keep on hearing more and more amazing stories. So I want to again thank everybody who comes on every week and people that email us and people that participate. It's really, we're doing it together. We're doing some grassroots movements over here, and we're really growing it. And I want to thank you personally. All those who are watching this later on YouTube, please click on the like button and click on the subscribe button to Coach Menachem. I want to first start off with our advertising sponsors to thank them. The Lakewood Scoop here in Lakewood. I want to thank Rabbi Yanif from Chazak for promoting us on all the Chazak platforms. And a special thank you to Chayla Kaufman and Shmuel Summer from JCN, the Jewish Content Network, for always promoting us across all the Jewish platforms. Again, for all those people that are here for the first time, every Sunday night at 10 o'clock on this Zoom ID, we have a share, different topics, different speakers, Rabbanim, therapists. So please let everybody know about that. Next Sunday, May 9th, we're going to have an amazing program with actually the person who started the program, the first year, Mordechai Weinberger, a very good friend of me and Menachem's, who's a big therapist. And we're going to be discussing dealing with difficult people, family members, personality disorders, and how we could, I'm sure we could all relate to that family member, that person that we have to deal with in our life that's complicated. He's actually writing a book about it, so it's going to be an amazing program. It's pretty much relevant to everybody. So please come and join and let people know about it. The Coach Menachem Show is collaborating with OK Clarity. It's a greater health and wellness of the Jewish community around the globe. OK Clarity is the online platform for mental health in the Jewish community. They have a platform. They find therapists, coaches, nutritionists, engage in forums. They stay inspired. Links will be sent out after the show. Again, we have the schus tonight and the honor of having such a special person come on. And I have a tremendous respect for him. We're going to get into it soon. Glen Holman, LCSW, a therapist from Far Rockaway. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and give chizik in some difficult times. And we're going to get in. We have a lot to get into. We're just going to start off first with our host, Coach Menachem. Opening words.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to another shir. Another show, Let's Get Real with Coach Menachem, show number 53, Kanai Nahara Baruch Hashem. And I want to thank all of you again for the feedback, whatever the feedback is, helping us grow, helping us get to greater heights over here. So tonight's topic is a little bit something that the whole college soul is wants to hear a little bit. But the truth is, we had planned to have Glen Holman already a while this week, really to discuss grief and loss on a personal level. But unfortunately, Klal Yisrael is going through now grief and loss on a global level, and many families on a personal level. Hashem should help an achama and the refuah shlem for all those that need it. But in a way, it's still too fresh, too new to come and sit down and talk when it's actually just happened and people are really having a hard time, and sometimes it's hard to hear these concepts right away. It sometimes could be counterproductive to talk while you can sometimes feel that you can't relate, because it's really something that you feel, and like we discussed many times, the talking is the logic. It takes time. It is a process. I'm sure we'll hear about it tonight. The process, the grieving process, and sometimes there are no words. Simply no words. Like we see when Aharon lost his two sons. Pashat Vayidem Aharon. There's different pshatim. Vayidem, if he had thoughts, he didn't have thoughts, but it was a b'chin of Vayidem Aharon. There's nothing you can say. And the truth is, the grieving process, everybody is different. Two people can see the same story, go through the same thing, and they experience different feelings. It could be two family members, same parents, they have different feelings. And the way they react. And personally, what I speaking to people now, some people, they don't want to hear anything that happens. Some people need to know exactly what happens. Some people start blaming, analyzing why, maybe this, maybe that's, talking about it. These are all forms of what a person does when you hear and experience these things. Now, again, there's no right and wrong. The first thing is just to to be aware. This is what happens. This is what we do. Okay, but eventually, there's a process that we'll hear more tonight. So on the one hand, we believe we're maminim b'nei maminim, that Hashem runs the world, and the good things and the things that don't seem so good. But on the other hand, we can't deny our humanity, and it's painful. It's real pain. You can't just say, I'm continuing. I don't have any pain. Sometimes it gets suppressed. But what we need to do is create a space that we should know that sometimes we just don't know. And the things that we love to make sense. Our human brain needs to make sense of what's going on until we see things that just don't make sense. And then we understand that us little people over here cannot understand what's going on. So at Tefillah to Hashem, we should get the chizuk that we need. In Mitzvah tonight, we should be able to listen, pick up just by getting together tonight. Klal Yisrael gets together and to be mechazik ourselves. This itself should be a big a chizuk, and we should be mechazik ourselves with an emunah betochen. And in Mitzvah tonight we'll hear a little bit from Glen Holman. I believe he's helping many people, the experience from other people and his own experience. In Mitzvah we'll be able to take out some chizuk. And before we start, I want to be mechabed Rabbi Noach Fried, if you can say a kapitel Tillim for the Cholim and for Klal Yisrael.
Okay, we're going to say 130 kapitel Kof Lamed or Noach Fried. Everybody will put it on the screen and we can all say it together. This is for all the people that are still in the hospital and for the families. This is by request of Mr. Glen Holman, and let's all try to say it together. Noach, go pasuk by pasuk.
Shiram alois v'imam akim k'sicha Adonai. Adonai shimu v'kaili tiana oznecha kashiva istakol tachninoi. Im avoinois tishma ya Adonai miyamoid. Ki imchu haslichu l'ma'an tivurai. Kivisi Adonai kivsu nafshi v'ludvroi hoicholti. Nafshi l'Adonai mishoimrim laboiker, shoimrim laboiker. Yachel Yisrael el Adonai, ki im Adonai ha'chesed v'habei imoi fidus, v'hi yivdes Yisrael mikol avinoisav. Achayni kol beis Yisrael hanesinim batzuru v'shivyu, ha'oindim ben bayam v'bayabushu, hamukam yirachem alayam v'yotziem mitzuru v'vuchu, m'afaylu lo'iru, m'shibid l'geilu, hashtu bagulu v'zmankuru v'noi marumay.
Amen.
Menachem, such a beautiful opening. We have a lot to say here tonight, so I'll get started. We'll get a little warmed up here tonight. Again, Menachem opened up. I'm just a little bit blown away, and I have to share this with everybody. Tonight's share was pre-planned a long time ago. Glen Holman was supposed to come on actually last week, and by request, I had the Rosh Yeshiva who was available, Reb Shalom Kamenetsky, just last Sunday, and I really actually pushed him, a little bit forced him to switch, and it worked out last second, and this topic in the flyer was already all pre-planned. This was not because of what happened, the tragedy in Meron. So as we all know, Hashem runs the show, but you can definitely see Hashem runs the show. And it's impeccable timing that we're here. And just everybody keep in mind, we are going to discuss a little bit. We're going to open up with Meron, but we're really focusing on personal loss. Loss is, it's a big word, and we're going to get into that with Glenn. And tonight's going to be a vulnerable program. We're going to be as let's get real as it can get. And let's start off with that. Tonight's shir is being learned L'Zeicha Nishmas. First is being L'Zeicha Nishmas, my mother, Peral Penina Bas Rebbeil Tzvi, who was nifter at a very young age of 49. I was only 20 years old, and it was a tremendous hard time for me personally. And there's chus from being mechazik, all the hundreds of people here, mentioned the thousands of people that will watch this. It should be a big chus for neshama. Tonight, also impeccable timing, is my father-in-law's second yahrzeit. He was killed in a horrific car crash 2 years ago. And my wife made a thing in his chus. Put on the flyer, please. I'm going to read what she made for everybody. Could read it together with me, but it's just interesting. She started last year. It's basically a sheitel gamach / exchange. People that have sheitels. I'll read it the way my wife wrote it. My father, Olav Shalom, was nifter 2 years ago today. Last year, I launched this initiative as an aliyah for my father's neshama. Baruch Hashem, many sheitels have already been proudly worn by the new owners. I've been a sheitel mach for over 20 years, and over the time, I've seen many women have sheitels sitting around that they don't see themselves wearing anymore. I arrange a system that enables those sheitels to be refurbished and worn by somebody in need. Once I receive the sheitels, I fix them up, I make them look brand new at a very low cost to the new owner. This way, woman who can't afford a brand new shaitel walk away feeling confident and beautiful. And the footnote is Leil Nishmas Tuvi Ben Yosef, my father-in-law, whose yard side is Monday night. My father always said that he wanted to be a business partner with me. Through this project, I'm finally making the dream come true. So Menachem will send out the email with the flyer. Anybody who has a shaitel or knows anybody wherever you live, you could text my wife or call her 414-687-8462. And just 1 second. Okay. Hold on 1 sec. Yeah. Okay. And the shiur is also be learning tonight. Schus Zech Neshama for Nechama Liba Bas Zelek Shaul. Zelek Shaul is better known as Glen Holman, and is also his second daughter, whose name is Miriam Bas Zelek Shaul. Miriam and Glen's family started an incredible organization called Me'irim, which helps bereaving siblings deal with loss of losing a sibling. They have retreats, weekend getaways, and Glen could talk about it a little bit. If anybody has any mice or money or anything they could give, can go to the website. Me'irim is MAYRIM.org. I wanted to play the video, but I'm not going to play it. But it's an amazing organization, and Glen is absolutely unbelievable. Again, tonight we're talking about a very sensitive topic. I'm going to try to discuss grief and loss experience more in the personal life. Again, we're going to touch upon the Meron tragedy a little bit, but we're trying to really focus on personal losses. Everybody has personal loss in life, even without death. We'll get to that also. But obviously death, sicknesses and other things. I'm going to read Glen Holman's bio first, and then I'm going to read a bio that I wrote about him. Glen Holman is a licensed clinical worker who works with adults and couples. He has a private practice in 5 towns. Glen is the founder and executive director of Me'irim, an organization that offers events and services for families who have experienced loss of a child. Glen's area of expertise includes grief, crisis, and trauma therapy. My bio is Glen Holman. I just heard this from so many people. I got calls actually today. Glen Holman and his wife are both amazing and incredible people. I've heard this from multiple of his colleagues and friends. They call him just a simple guy. He's not a Rosh Hashiva. He's not this dynamic guy who comes out and is going to blow everybody away. They call him a simple Joe. But they call him, he's an admiral amongst admirals. His life challenges, not only does he stand up to them, and his wife, they grow from them, and they do the ultimate with their challenges that hopefully one day could all do that, is really help other people with that, and people in need. It's a big schus for me to really have him tonight. I'm really honored. Glen Holman, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Asher and Menachem. First, I just wanted to commend you and tell you what an amazing thing that you're doing. I think that the world is yearning. There's a hunger for real talk, people who can get real, who could be real. So I think that this is such an important platform and such an incredible thing that you're doing for Klal Yisrael. And I'm sure everyone shares with me that it should be a schus for your families, for you and your families. You should have nakas and simcha and health and all good things, because it's really, truly incredible what you're doing. And I'm honored to have a small part for tonight and being a part of that. So Asher asked me to spend a few minutes sharing my personal story. We written an article recently in the Mishpacha magazine, but this is probably my first forum sharing this story in such a public way. So you bear with me. I remember as a young boy growing up, there was a popular question that my parents' generation that people asked. And they asked, where were you when John F. Kennedy was shot? And everyone seemed to know. Everyone around always knew exactly where they were when President Kennedy was shot. They would say, I was in this park, I was in this building, I was at work. Everyone knew. But it's something I think that people in my generation really didn't understand the magnitude. We didn't understand why everyone had understood or everyone knew and remembered exactly where they were. Until September 11th, till 9/11, when now in our generation and people who were born then, if you ask them, where were you when the planes hit the World Trade Center? Everyone knows. Everyone's aware of exactly where they were in that moment. And what I see is like this. There are moments in time, there are moments in our lives, in everyone's lives, where something will happen that's so transformative, that's so significant to our entire lives, that we will never forget where we were, and we'll never forget what we're doing. And those are positive moments, like when you get engaged, or it might be when you get married. It might be when you give birth to a baby. I remember when my daughter Nechama was born, our first child. And I looked at her and I held this newborn baby and I said, I'm going to protect you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure nothing bad happens to you. And that's a moment that I'll never forget. That's a moment that lives with me and stays with me. And there are other moments, not so pleasant moments. I remember another moment in my life, about 5 years after that, when a doctor told me that my daughter Menachem was very ill. She was terminally ill disease. And the same thing, I remember looking at her and I said, with my eyes, not with my mouth, I said, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to make sure nothing happens to you. And you fast forward 6 years later, and my daughter had been sick for 6 years in a very difficult circumstance. She was very ill, and her care was very consuming, all consuming. And she had been in a coma for around 6 weeks. And she, one day they reduced some of her medication and she woke up. And I hadn't seen her for about 6 weeks. Well, I mean, I had seen her, but I hadn't spoken to her in about 6 weeks. And I remember she said, I looked at her because she finally had woke up for a few moments. And I looked at her and I said, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to protect you. I want to make sure nothing happens to you. And she nodded and she looked at me and she understood what I meant. And about 24 hours later, she passed away. And that was my first real experience with significant, with death. My first real experience with losing someone that I loved. And that was incredibly painful. And it was shocking. I remember it was so shocking at the time that I even turned to a doctor who I knew well. I was very involved in her medical care. And I looked at her. I said to this doctor, she's not alive, right? Like she's like really not alive. And it took me a while. It took me time to really connect with that, to understand that. And we went through our journey. We decided around sometime within the next few months, we decided that we would start an informal organization to help families who had a child loss. Because we saw that there was a need for it. There were Chalaifan, of course, they were very involved. We felt that for an extended period of time afterwards, and also for the siblings, we felt there was a great need, and we started holding a Shabbaton, and we held the Shabbaton since around 2005. And it was a family thing. It was part of our family. Everyone in our family was involved in this organization. It was mostly mostly a retreat. We did some other small things, but mostly it was a yearly retreat. It grew till last year, there were 400 people who came. And the person who mostly was involved was my daughter, Miriam. My daughter, Miriam, was really at the forefront of this organization. And she felt that it wasn't enough. She felt that we need to do more. And I had another moment where I got a call that my daughter, Miriam, was sick. We weren't expecting it, and she was sick, and we knew sort of what we were up against. And for a few years, around 3 years, we did everything in our power, everything that we could to help her. And there's a lot of stories, a lot of public stories about her life at the time and things that we accomplished, which are online, newspapers, legal journals, all different things we did to help her. And sometime it's around 3 years now, she decided that she said we weren't doing enough, and she wanted to really formalize the organization. She wanted to do a lot more. She wanted to get much more involved. She wanted to hold weekly and monthly events and meetings for mothers, for fathers, for siblings. And we started the planning stages. And shortly after that, her condition could decline significantly. And she passed away. And when she passed away, she was 21 years old. My daughter Menachem was 10 when she passed away. Miriam was 21. And when she passed away, it was very clear to us what we needed to do. We knew what she would have wanted. There was no question. So we went and we formalized the organization. We called it Meirim, to lift up, from the word Miriam, named after Miriam. And we decided that we were going to immerse ourselves in helping other families in Miriam's memory. Because even when those 3 years, when she was very, very sick, and people didn't know, nobody knew. I remember even when she passed away, we got calls from people from Meirim. They were shocked. Someone got a call that we formalized the organization. We called it Meirim after Miriam, and they thought there was a mistake, and they called us up. They said, not Miriam, you mean Nechama. But unfortunately, the truth was that it was Miriam had passed. And we spent a lot of the last year, actually 3 years, but last year has been more difficult because of COVID. But the last few years, really reaching out, holding events, doing what we could, so that because we found that people, and you'll find yourselves probably that when you go through a tzara, you go through a difficulty, that having someone who understands that particular tzara is different than anything else. That there's some kind of bond, there's some kind of connection that we get when we see somebody, when we meet somebody. It's like an almost instant connection when someone has a tzara that's similar to ours. So I've, together with my family, this has been a primary focus of ours, an important focus, together with my practice. And I hope tonight we'll use this as an opportunity to use our experiences and my professional experience and personal experience to help others. Obviously, with what's happened recently in Meron, it's a global, everyone's grieving. Nobody's not grieving. The whole world is grieving. Whole Klal Yisrael is grieving. So that's something we could talk about. So I hope Mitzvah Hashem will use this opportunity to get a better sense of the type of questions, and we'll do what we can together, b'yachad, to try to talk about what are some of the ways that people grieve and how to handle grief. So thank you, Usher, for the opportunity to introduce myself.
Thank you, Glenn. Wow.
It's just one other thing I want to add. It's mayrim.com.
Yeah.
Oh, then
Spell it.
mayrim.com. It's mayrim.com. So you'll see a little bit over there. The Mishpacha article, if you want to see more details about our life story, Miriam's story. So.
Okay. Let's start with this, because we got a lot of emails about this, and obviously this is the big topic right now. And let's start with that. I'm not even gonna do a poll tonight. Let's just get straight into it. One of the questions that came in, I'll read this question, but then we'll just globalize the question. A teacher wrote me this question a half hour before the share. My 14-year-old student lost her brother in the tragic Meron event on Thursday. I don't know how to deal with my 8th grade class. I don't know how I will face my mourning student when she returns to school. I feel broken for her, for her family, for all those who've lost the ones in the tragic event. I don't know what we should do or should say. Let's just globalize that, just in general. We're here tonight. I got a bunch of different questions, why, where, what, when, and how. Just, Glenn, this is your forte. How do us as and a global, we all feel a certain type of pain. I'm assuming most people here, it's not a personal, they didn't lose their sibling here, but we all feel it. How do we go about that?
Okay, so first, Lifeline, especially Zahava Farman and Dr. Fox, they have amazing people. If you have specifically the person's question about how they should deal with the classroom, I would say that it's outside the scope of what we're going to accomplish here. So I would say reach out to Lifeline. They're unbelievable. They do this. Unfortunately, they do this enough, and they have great expertise in it. So I wanted to share a little bit. Obviously, this topic, we had talked about me coming on before this tragedy happened. And we discussed, we felt we couldn't ignore the topic. I want to share a few points of that. One is, it's a very unique tragedy. First of all, it's a totally different scale. 45 from people to pass away in one event. I don't remember anything in recent history where such a thing has happened, like in our days. Such a scale that it's like overwhelming. And the other aspect is this: it wasn't like an external threat. Unfortunately, we've had experiences where through terrorist attacks or other things where there's an external threat. So this is also unique, the fact that it was just a tragic accident. The other aspect that's really, really interesting is that this event happened at a time when from the digital perspective, the world is connected. The social media exposure, when I say social media, I mean all kinds of technology. It could be WhatsApp, it could be text messages, even phone calls. Our ability to get information across the other side of the world is unprecedented. There's never been, what you have today has never happened in the history of the world, where something can happen on the other side of the world, and to the degree that information, both in pictures and in information, could be disseminated in such rapid fire. And the extent that we're going to get overwhelmed by it is going to be somewhat commensurate or can be commensurate with how much exposure we have to that event. So the fourth thing that makes this tragedy unique, is that it's coming at a time when we've just experienced a year of COVID. The whole year of COVID, I mean, everybody's gone through. I remember in the beginning of COVID, actually I was ill myself, right at the beginning of COVID. And it was a daily roll call. You're hearing about people passing away. It was so tragic and terrible. And here we are, it's a year later, and things are starting to turn around. We're starting to feel hopeful. Well, some of the restrictions are starting to be lifted. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. People are getting vaccinated. There's all these experiences, all these things going on in our lives. We're starting to feel like, hey, things are going to be different now. And then this happens. I watched the videos and saw what happened right before, and it's heartbreaking to see that the Klal Yisrael was sitting together, standing together, however it was, all together singing Anim Amim, like right before it happened. It's something that it's so overwhelming. It's hard to really put your hands around. And grief or loss, tragedy. So it's a reminder that we can't control the world. It's a reminder that our level of control is very significant, and we have an illusion of control. And that's something that is pervasive. And grief, and especially with death or other types of loss also, help us realize that we're fragile, we're vulnerable. And it's natural for people to start to blame, right? What you find very commonly is the following. You find that people will try to blame others. That happens a lot. They'll try to blame it on this authority or the police or the government or somebody or on Jews or on Menachem and halacha. They'll try anything in the world to blame it, or they'll blame it on some lack of conformity to a halacha or adherence. So it's very, very popular that people will try to blame someone or something. And that largely comes from an emotional place. It comes from our fear or recognition of the lack of control that we have. So that's one really common thing. That's why we're hearing. Someone's made a joke. They said, I never knew so many people in my life were experts in traffic control or large crowd control, because that's all everyone talks about. But really, there's just grief. It really is just sad. So one of the things that might be helpful is just to acknowledge that we do have a lack of control in the world. And maybe if we focus on thinking about what I can do right, that's helpful. Okay, this happened. How can I improve myself as a person? How can I find meaning in the accident, in this tragedy? How can I find meaning for myself and for my family, for my school, for my community? Finding meaning could be a positive step. Looking for who to blame, it's a perpetually unfulfilling process, because it never really answers the question, it never really addresses the truth. It's so that we don't have control. So trying to find control in a place where we don't have control just leads to a very unfulfilling place. So I just want to mention a few other points, then there's so much to cover. I don't want to dominate the conversation around this one piece. But the next aspect I want to mention is universal to all the grief we'll talk about tonight. And that's everyone grieves differently. There's no one right way to grieve. And even though many of us didn't have a direct connection to that, it's kind of built into Jewish DNA to care about other Jews. When we hear one person pass away, a neighbor, someone in the community, someone not in the community, someone passes away, we feel it. So something like this with 45 Jews in one day, young children, sometimes young kids, everything in between, innocent people, it's natural that we're going to feel it. So we have to acknowledge, yeah, it's okay. I'm grieving because this is something that affects Klal Yisrael, affects me. And I grieve differently than everybody else. Every person, just like every face is different, every thought process is different. Every person grieves differently. The last aspect is also universal, which is trauma. The way I describe trauma, I heard it from somewhere, I don't remember where, which is that trauma is 10 gallons of emotion, like 10 gallons of water in a 3-gallon bucket. We've got more water than capacity to hold. So I imagine, and a lot of the work that I do is we try, one of the things that you can do, and this is why I go back to social media exposure, is that we don't have to relate to this as someone who's actually experienced this loss. There's an addictive feeling that we have to watch every image, watch every video, go to every levaya, and we don't. Now, it's great if a person finds that comforting. Well, of course, there's nothing against it. But for many people, it's just too much. So I imagine, and this is what I do a lot with my clients, imagine a CEO who has the head of a very large corporation. And someone comes in with a problem with HR, then someone else comes in with a problem with operations, finance team comes in, product, warehouse, shipping, everyone. And people are coming into the CEO and he says, wait a second, I can't work like this. I can't function. I can't address everything at once. So he says, listen, there's a gorgeous waiting room outside. You 7 sit outside. You 2 can stay in a line in front. And he addresses the problem one at a time. And that's one of the things with grief and with trauma, is that we have to find ways to kind of manage the influx of grief, of trauma, of emotion, and try to deal with it, one part at a time. And that's something we'll talk about more. So I think if we could kind of recognize that it is overwhelming and try to regulate it to some degree, those are some helpful aspects for trauma.
Okay, there's a question that came in. I know there are 5 stages of grief, and I've been reading about it since I lost my mother. For some reason, I can't get myself out of the depression stage. I can't seem to move forward in life. Do I wait till it happens naturally? So I think maybe, Glenn, if you can, not everybody is aware of the 5 stages of grief, so maybe you can start with that.
Okay. So there are some say 7, but the standard is there's 5 stages of grief, right? And I want to just say something before I get to stages, which is, before we get to stages, and David Kessler is a great book. I don't get a commission for the book, but I'll tell you, it's a great book called the sixth stage, meaning, finding meaning. Very, very interesting book. I started reading it. I can't say I read all the way through it, but it's kind of, whatever I read, I found very fascinating and also very in line with the way that I approach it. And one of the things that David Kessler has said, which also I've shared, was this idea that people feel that there's this very rigid 5-step course, like denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, that there's 5 stages that are very rigid, and everyone's, okay, so I went through stage 1, okay, now I'm into stage 2, then I go to stage 3. And what he says, and what I've also shared with many people, is that 1, it's not linear. You could go in any direction. A person could skip. They could go to 1 and then go from 1 to 2, back to 1, could skip over, go to 3. They could start with 3, go back to 2. So really the idea of a stages, and I think this was the intention of a stages, was to help people understand where they're coming from. It was saying, oh, that it could be called phases. I think they could be called different types of maybe expressions or feelings that people have. It's not a rigid linear process. And I think that that's really, really important, because some people say, well, I don't understand. I went through the first 2 stages, and so I thought I'd be at the 3rd stage, but now I'm back at the 1st, or I skipped over to the 5th, or I skipped everything. I went to the 5th, and now I'm at the 1st. So I think to a large degree, the stages can be very much misunderstood. What you kind of see is, if you look at the stages, is a range. And the range goes for a lot of times from a place of, this is shock to the system, denial. Like they can't believe it, right? Kind of like I described earlier when my daughter Menachem passed away. Like, this is just too much. I can't relate to this. This is, wow. I can't believe it just happened to me. It's a shock. And a lot of times it's a shock, even when people knew about it, like let's say someone was sick for a long time. Even under those circumstances, it still could be a shock to the system. It's so ironic. It's the most natural thing. There's nothing more natural than life and birth. But they're both on some level of shock, and certainly death is a shock to people. It's otherworldly. It's not something that we can relate to, this idea that you're here and you're gone. So because of that, it becomes very difficult for people to relate to. So what I want to share about depression, about that piece, is a very strong feeling among people that we need to pathologize We need to like make them like something's wrong with them. So which is I'm depressed. So well, it's understandable that you're sad. I mean, you lost your mother. So losing a parent is a very difficult thing. It's a very sad thing. So the idea that you're depressed because you lost your mother is something I think that's very normal. That's an understandable reaction. The question becomes, when does it become a scenario where you need to get external help? So if a person, there's no timeline to grief. I've talked about that many times. There's no timeline. If a person feels like they're not able to process the grief, or the grief is interfering with their either personal relationships, or their ability to work, or their ability to function, or they feel like they're overwhelmed all the time, so that's a good sign that to consider getting external help, getting professional help, because it says that you've got 10 gallons of water in a 3-gallon bucket. So we either have to make the bucket bigger, or we have to reduce the amount of water. So it's really important that, I think, one, we don't pathologize, and two, I think that people, there's a process. Grief is hard. It's painful. It's extremely, extremely painful and hard. And I think that people, as they go through it, if they can recognize, yeah, that's a normal reaction, then I think it could help it be a little more manageable. And when it becomes not manageable, when they can't find the coping skills, they reach out to friends, it's not working. They reach out to this person, it's not working. When they realize at a certain point that it's not helpful, that these tools they have are not helpful, and the impact on their functioning is so much more significant, well, then I think that that's a good sign. To start looking for help.
Okay, Glenn, let's get into some more questions. We have a lot of questions here. People want to ask live again every night. You hear, turn on your camera. You have Glen Holman. He's the best of the best of this, and there's nothing. We could be all open. This is real life. It's not nothing to be ashamed of. This is what we live with. And if you have something, please feel free to ask. A lot of people are texting, so let's go and let's really break it down. We're gonna get deep over here. After losing a child 3 years ago, I'm having a very hard time just going on in my life. Is there really anything that can give me hope? I'm not sure what kind of hope there is. I usually don't like to hear all the stuff that people tell me. Glenn.
Okay, so the first thing is like this. I think that often the loss, especially the loss of a child, which I have a lot of experience with, personal experience and professional experience, and through my work with Menachem, it's very, very difficult. I mean, what's worse than that? It's a very, very painful process. So I think there's this idea that time heals, and we look for that, and everybody wants to know this hope. So I think the idea is that we find that people who, as you go through this process, they get stronger. I mean, we see that people, as you surround yourselves, as you find tools, maybe it's like what we talked about, where people are connecting to other people who have had a similar loss, or people are working with others, working with a therapist, or maybe they're just able to find some meaning a different way, starting an organization, right? Like the Shekels, or doing something that you could find meaning in. I think that as people find meaning and people look to carry the loss, to carry the grief, so there's hope in that. People do get better. People do move on. If you're getting stuck in a way where you feel so hopeless, so that that's time to look at your coping skills, to look at what you have available to you. But it's when you first suffer a loss, it's hard. It's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's hard to see hope. It's hard to feel connected. It's hard to see that things will get better. And I think that every one of us, we're sort of built into us as Jews, that we want to move forward. We want to believe. We want things to get better. And there's nothing wrong with with that desire. That's a good thing. That's a good motivator. And at the same time, sometimes it's hard. It's okay to recognize that this is a hard process. And I think when we allow ourselves both things, the desire for hope, the desire for things to get better, and we also let us have our own feelings. We allow ourselves to have our feelings. We allow ourselves to feel how we feel and grieve how we grieve. And I think when you allow yourself to have both things, it makes it a lot easier. It makes it possible to move forward and to find hope.
Okay, Glenn, somebody jumped over here, texted the question. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to read two questions with it because we're going to go a little bit off the topic. You know, loss is not only death, it's a lot of losses. Somebody texted, can you speak about losing a relationship, a divorce, broken engagement, dating? And we got another question over here. Somebody wrote, they used to have all the money, family, they used to be on top of the world. They recently also got divorced. They lost their money, and their family is in shambles. They say, I feel the same loss as if someone I love died. My life died. How do I continue with my life?
Yeah. That's hard. I think when you talk about death, there's always multiple losses. It's never just the loss of a person. There's always something, there's always some other loss that's there. It might be the loss, example, someone loses a parent. It might be that parent was the greatest cheerleader in the world. That was the person who motivated you. That was the person who encouraged you. That's the person who was always supported you. And it's not enough just to look at the loss of the actual person, but you also, part of what holds people back is not looking at the loss of what the relationship meant. And that's true with everything. That's true with any type of loss. Divorce is a terrible loss. Losing a person's finances is a terrible loss. These are all incredibly difficult losses. So we have to look at, I think, you have to look at what did that mean for you? What did it mean to lose money? What did it mean to lose your spouse? Even if it was to divorce, was to death. What did it mean to lose moving? Lose your house. You know, even when you move, that's a loss. Imagine when you tell your kids you're moving. That's tough. It's benign. There might be somebody there's something happy about it, but it's also a loss of a job. And all these losses are just shocks to the system. They can be traumatic. And I think the one thing to look at in every loss is, what did this loss mean to me? Maybe it meant loss of respect. Maybe it meant loss of stature. Maybe it meant loss of feeling like someone cared about me, even if it wasn't so all the time. So looking at loss in terms of what it meant to you, I think is also a significant aspect. It's not just the actual loss itself. The sad thing is that when somebody, and we talk about this a lot, other losses like death is halacha sort of has a prescription about how things should go. There's a prescription around Shiva and then Shloshim and so on. But when it comes to loss like a divorce, where's the support? There's no prescription for the support. When you lose a job, there's no prescription for that support. So it could really be challenging in the fact that you don't really have the same support system. And that can make it a lot harder. You know, Shiva's hard. Shloshim's hard. Yeah. First year of Avelis is hard. But there is a support system. People recognize it. People are aware. People acknowledge it, hopefully in a good way. But if there's other type of losses, if you don't have the right support system, it could be really hard. Mental health issues. When people have someone in their family who has a mental health issue, they're all alone, very isolating. So I think when you experience these other losses, one, it's important for the person themselves to acknowledge they suffered a loss, to allow themselves to feel the loss, allow themselves permission to feel the loss. It's to find the right support system, the people around them, who they could reach out to and say, this is what's going on. Find maybe it's the right friends, maybe it's someone in the family, maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's other tools, but to give yourself permission that, because they're real losses also. And I think that it's something that unfortunately is not recognized as such. People, when you get divorced, you'll say Mazel Tov, or they say, okay, bet you're better off. But even in the worst relationship, and that's true of death also, even people who lose parents, it could be someone has a parent who they're estranged from for many years. There's still a loss. Because every loss represents, well, not every loss. Loss could be more than just what we typically think about. We always think of loss in terms of, I lost what I had. How about I lost the possibility of what I had, that it was never going to turn to anything else. Like in the example I said, an estranged parent. I lost the possibility that that my parents was ever going to validate me or recognize me or be proud of me. So I think that's also a big thing. There's a story about someone who lost about somebody who was he's a very wealthy guy. He's like in his 70s at the time. Very wealthy. He checked all the boxes, all the things we talked about earlier. This person, he had money, and he had a perfect family life and a wife and kids who were A students, and he had success in every area. There's no area that didn't have success in. And his mother, who was late into her 90s, she was ill at the end of her life, and she told him, "I'm proud of you." And he said that when she said, "I'm proud of you," like it outweighed everything. It was more important than anything that happened. Because the loss always represents something else. So in his case, he was lucky, right? At the end of his life, at least he got that validation he was looking for. So when his parents passed away, he was able to say, "Wow, I lost my mom saying I'm how great I am, how proud she is of me." Would it be true if she had passed away without saying it? He had lost the opportunity for her ever to say it. So when you have a divorce, the loss of this ever turning into what I dreamed. No one sits under the chuppah and thinks, maybe this won't work out. Maybe this will be a disaster. Everyone thinks under the chuppah, you look at your spouse, you think this is going to last forever. It's amazing. And when it doesn't turn into that, that's a loss also. It's a loss that all that potential, all that what I thought was going to be, will never be. Not with this person anyway. And that's a painful loss.
Okay. The next question here is, my sister lost her husband recently, and I want to reach out and help her. How soon is the appropriate time to do so, and how to go about it?
That's it. Okay. Okay. There's a couple of different components here. One is our desire to see someone else who's suffering and who's in loss, and wanting to impose on them to go about things in a certain way that we want to do. And that's tough, because our level of control is somewhat limited. Our ability to say, I want this person to get remarried, I want this person to move on, and they may or may not be on the same page as that. So I think one of the things that is very painful for people, and I could say that I see this a lot with family members. Say a scenario where someone has a child. I knew somebody who lost a one-day-old baby, and there was so much pressure on this person to move on. There was incredible pressure for this individual to get on with their lives, get past it, enough already, stop staying in the past. It was a one-day-old baby. How connected could you have felt? And I think it's really difficult when other people are pushing you to do something when you're not ready. And in a certain way, it's really, it's one of the most painful things in the world is to not let a person have their feelings, to deny a person permission to have their feelings. And by converse, perhaps the greatest pain is someone denying you having your feelings, and the greatest gift is giving them permission to have their feelings. So trying to get somebody to move on, pressuring them to move on, and getting them to do what you want them to do when they're not ready is it's a challenge, and it may not be appropriate. And it could probably, in many cases, it could cause a lot of pain and a lot of harm. So I think that's one piece of this question. And the other question is, somebody says, I have this experience, I've suffered this loss, and I want to move on, but I don't know how. And that's a totally different question. That's a totally different question about how do I move on from from grief? How do I move on from loss? So does that answer the question, or do you want me to?
Maybe you can help the sister that lost the husband, when she does get that phone call. How should she tell her sister, thank you? Or wait, give her the words.
So, the words to what? I'm not sure I get the question.
Her sister wants to help her,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pressure for her.
So I think the how does the sister tell? So there's the sister who's not who didn't suffer the loss. I think what she can do is just accept that where her sister's at, and let her be where she's at. And even though it's difficult, it's a challenge to see somebody going in a direction where you feel like they should go in a different direction. That's a challenge. So I think to the degree that she could accept that without saying anything, I think what she could say is, I get, I respect your process. And vice versa. When a person's in a situation where they don't want that external pressure, it's let me have my process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Glenn, let's go to a live question now. Okay, let's take some live. Anybody wants to ask live, let me know now, because we're putting in order. Okay, you're on.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. My question was about a subject that you touched upon before, which is the loss of a dream. I don't think people recognize what that could actually mean to a person, whether it's the loss of a potential relationship, it's the loss of a certain career path, the loss of, let's say, not being told that a person cannot have kids, or whatever it may be. But how can we be more empathetic when someone has a loss that is maybe less tangible and more spiritual? Like they always thought their life would go a certain way, and it's not turning out that way.
Yeah. So I think the question is how to support somebody who an experience, let's say a spiritual experience or a spiritual limitation, how that affects you, right? And how do I sort of relate to that person? Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So my approach to that is in my practice, sometimes people come to me and they will experience some sort of loss. I'm trying to be very careful because I don't want to offend anybody. They'll experience a loss that other people won't relate to. Okay. Let's say, for example, let's take an example, that a single girl is dating a boy, and she perceives him as the best thing that's ever happened in the world. She is by far the most incredible person. He is by far the most incredible person she's ever met. And they're going to have this wonderful marriage. And they get engaged. And he breaks it off. And this girl is totally distraught. Her life's over. It's never going to be what she wanted to be. And everyone's telling her, don't worry about it. That's the natural one. The natural feeling is, don't worry about it. You're going to find someone else. You dodged the bullet. You're so lucky. You're lucky. This guy wasn't worthy of you. You're better than him. So everyone, sort of a natural inclination is to say that. And it might be true in the objective world, if there is one, that she'll find someone else and she'll be happier. And she's lucky that she didn't marry somebody who wasn't interested in her. But it's largely unhelpful. It's invalidating. She's going to feel totally invalidated. And all the efforts that people try to make to help her fall short. One of the reasons they fall short is that it's an emotional issue, not a problem, but it's an emotional issue. And we're trying to find a logical solution to an emotional problem. So that it doesn't really work great. You need it if you have an emotional problem, you need an emotional solution. So I think when people feel validated, there's something about that creates a connection. When people feel that what they're feeling, it goes back to what I said earlier, that giving them permission to feel. It's okay that the way you see it is hurtful to you. And you're in pain. And to the degree that you can allow them to have their feelings, it kind of helps them to feel connected and they're able to move on. And all the efforts to continue to push them to see it your way, that they're wrong, right? You hear it in the words. You have no reason to be this upset because you're going to find someone else. You have no reason to feel this way because he was the wrong guy for you. And you hear it. And if you're hearing in your voice when you're saying to someone that you're really telling them that their feeling is wrong, you're gonna experience a lot of resistance. And I think that to the degree that you can feel that the person feels that, yeah, you understand them. And we don't always see things the same way. We don't always understand them. So that's our job, is to get curious. Like, if our goal is to help them, give them permission. And in order for me able to do that, I need to ask questions. Well, what's so hard? Well, it's so, I see it's so hard for you. Help me understand what's so hard. And that's okay. Although I think if we just allow people to have their feelings, one, I think it's the greatest gift you can give to a person at an emotional level. And two, it's the thing that, almost ironically, in that case, when you actually allow them to experience it the way they experience it, it kind of helps them to move on in a way that may never happen if you keep telling them you're wrong. So in a certain way, that's empathy. That's true empathy. And I think that it gives people a lot of strength to move on and to get to that next step. And it may not, they may stay stuck in it. However, that's true empathy. That's what we're looking to give.
Right. Can I ask one more, if you can explain one more concept? The concept of like the bell curve, that in order to overcome an emotion, you actually have to go through it and feel it.
I'm not going to address it now.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, that's okay. Don't mind. But you can reach out to me afterwards. I'm not sure for this forum it's particularly valuable, but you're welcome to reach out to me afterwards, and I'll go through it.
Hey Glenn, let's jump into the next topic over here. It's a little bit different twist. People want to, they go through hard things and sometimes they try to go back into life. Question is very interesting. Since I lost my child, my friends and neighbors seem to stay away from me since they are not comfortable around me. When they are talking about their kids or family vacations, I come near them and they slowly end the conversation saying, "Oh, it's so nice to see you. I got to go," or squeeze my arm. It's making me feel like, why am I losing everything? How do I show people I want to be treated just like a regular person?
Yeah. Well, that's really painful because you suffered a loss, often a traumatic or a complex loss, and now, like the way you described it, now I've lost everything. I don't have the support. I don't have friends. I remember after our first loss, there was a person who used to cross the street when they'd see us, and that was hurtful. And I think it goes back to the idea that many people are uncomfortable with grief. They're uncomfortable with death. They're uncomfortable with loss. So for them, it's easier for them when they see us and cross the street. It's like, I don't have to deal with that possibility, that reality. Like that, there's a reality that challenges their own perspective, their own sense of reality, their life that I guess either doesn't have loss or doesn't have the type of loss that you have. It's much easier for them to kind of just ignore it. So one of the things I think that's really
I think he's frozen. One second, I think. Menachem, is he frozen?
Yep.
Okay, let's give him a minute. Let's give him a minute to get back on. Glad you're frozen. If you either go back in or out, or
Go back in or out.
Menachem, you answer the question.
I'm not sure.
We can do that. Hold on.
Sit around the table and discuss it with them.
These questions
Let's
these questions are tough questions.
send him out.
No, don't send out. You can't send out. Let him go now.
This is a process. Let the process happen.
1 minute, it's coming back on. Well, yeah. Now, everybody, let's play the video. You know something? Let's play the video. He's out. Let's play the video.
We do the poll.
No, let's play the video.
No.
Take a deep breath.
He's not on. Okay, I'm going to play actually the video from Menachem.
You're going to wait for him to come back in.
Okay, let's take a poll. While he gets back on, let's take a poll. Okay. Oh, he's on. He's on.
You can still take a poll.
So anyway, what is let's ask everybody the question over here, and let's do this while he gets back on. What's the way of your dealing with the tragic news from Iran? It's 4 options. Either I can't stop sitting in the pain. B, I cry for a while and then go on. C, I keep myself busy and try not to think about it. Or D, I shut down and I can't continue. When you think about Maron, which one is you? Second question, in your personal life, have you had a major tragedy or loss? It doesn't have to be specifically death. It could be obviously other things we spoke about. But so please answer both of those polls while Glenn is getting reset up. I just had a loss. I lost Glenn.
I am back. Can you hear me?
We're just doing a poll now. It's a very interesting poll. We said, what was the way that what way were you dealing with the tragic news from Iran? Either I can't stop sitting in the pain, they're just 24/7 thinking about it. I cry for a while and go on. Okay, let's end it and let's share the answers. Okay. So again, 22% of people said I can't stop sitting in the pain. 49% of people said I cry for a while then go on, which was most people. 26% of people said I keep myself busy and try not to think about it. And 3% of people said I shut down and I can't continue. Second question was, in your personal life, have you had a major loss or tragedy? Like I said before, it wasn't only specifically death, but a major loss. Glenn, 63% of people over here on tonight's share feel they had a major loss and tragedy in their lives. So I guess we definitely hit the right crowd.
Wow, that is wow. Yeah, I mean, it's there's so much loss. There's so much pain out there. There's so much struggle. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, and every one of us has known loss.
Let's go back to the question. So the bottom line is the person has the neighbor, and it's death. I have to be honest with you. I know this and other things in life. My own personal stuff, and people, when they go through a hard time in life, people go through a traumatic thing. I'm sure everybody means well and everybody wants to be there for them, but for the person going through it, it just seems like people run away from them. They try to avoid that. So let's go back to that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry for the technical. Not sure what happened. So one of the things. Another loss. Yeah. So one is the idea that people, as I was saying, one of the things that's hard is when people, they run away from you because they don't want your reality challenges their reality, which is that the world is more fragile than we think. It's more vulnerable than we think. The other aspect, I think, which I referenced, was a lot of times, and I said, especially with kids, they want to be treated normal. And the irony is that people run away. It's natural. We're not sure when someone, especially a complex loss, or it could be something when someone it could be divorce, it could be death, it could be a child loss, it could be a spouse's loss, it could be that he's lost all his money, it could be any number of things. So we don't know how to react to it. We're not sure how to treat them. So what we end up doing is, more often than we wish we would, is that we tend to run away. We avoid. And in reality, the two things that people want it to happen is, one, they want to feel like they're normal. And the other thing is that people who suffer a loss, like grief, more often than not, appreciate, almost like a gift, when someone comes over to them and says, I remember your child. I remember your husband. Wow, I remember your dad. And when you suffered a loss, it's not like you forget about it. It's not like you don't remember it. So when other people avoid you, they're not sparing you from anything. They're not sparing you from I'd forgotten about this loss. So now that you brought it up, you hurt me. It's the opposite. People perceive when someone comes over to them as a gift. And that's a tremendous gift that you can give to someone who suffered a loss. So I think that it's very normal to want to be treated normal. I spoke to someone recently, and they were suffering so badly because everybody in their family was kind of ignoring them. they didn't include them. They said, we can't include you in what's going on, almost as if they said, we can't include you what's going on because you're different. We have to, it was someone who lost a spouse. And they said, well, they weren't invited to the other things that everyone else is invited to. So it was really, really hurtful to them. So I think treat them normal. Two, if you have a story, people who have suffered a loss greatly appreciate when others are, bring up the topic or share a memory. And running away can cause a lot of pain.
Okay, we're getting a lot of versions of this question. I think it's a very standard question. I think we should really get on that topic. People are texting me. Let's go with this question, but we're going to go globalize it. I lost my mother 10 years ago. I get these strong emotional feelings and sometimes I even burst out in tears. Is it normal? I see that some people get over losing parents much quicker than I.
Yeah.
What's the normal? What's the textbook time that you cry and the textbook time that you go you move on? Like, is it 36 hours? How does it work?
Yeah. So, this is like I shared earlier. There's a greater amount of pressure to move on. I think a lot of times the desire to move on is dictated by other people's need for you to move on. Like it challenges their reality. As long as you're stuck in this grief, they have to remember and be aware of the fact that the world is vulnerable. So therefore, they're just desperate for you to move on because they don't know how to deal with the grief. They don't know how to deal with your loss. So there's a great pressure sometimes for you to move on. So there's no timeline to grief. It's actually very painful. I think that people feel so much pressure. People who have had losses, that they feel great pressure. There's no timeline. I think it's more about looking at the specific lack of function in your life or how it's affecting your ability to function is more, that's when it might be time to say, well, I need extra help. But I don't think that there's a specific timeline that anybody should be held to where it says, well, other people, they grieve this way and you grieve differently. Some people don't get over grief very quickly, seemingly, and then it hits them later on. And some people sort of have an tense episodes or a tense feeling of grief in the beginning, and then it dissipates, and then it comes back. So just like there's no specific timeline or specific stages that you have to follow, these rigid stages that you have to follow, there's no rigid timeline that a person has to follow. It's very individualistic, except when you're struggling to function, at some point, you might consider to get additional help.
Okay, let's go to a live question. One second. Hi, you're on.
Hi, I'm muted.
You're unmuted.
Okay, great. Hi, thank you so much. I wanted to talk about a topic that's actually a little bit not spoken about much, more miscarriages and stillborns. When I had a miscarriage this year, and I actually got to meet a lot, I got in touch with a group of other women that had also gone through miscarriages, many much worse than my own. Many actually that had stillborns, and the grief and the suffering and the loss is like I felt so lucky that I was not feeling it as much as they were. But so much of the discussion that they had was that it's so unspoken about, it's so hidden, nobody knows. Many people don't know when the person has either the miscarriage, they don't know that they were expecting. And sometimes people are at the end, let's say towards the end of their pregnancy, and they lose, everyone does know, and people just don't know how to approach them. They're in so much pain and there's so much loss, but the response that people give them is like, come on, it's normal to have a miscarriage, or every 1 in 4, or everybody has their piece of advice of what it is. And it's not a real child. And to all of the women that had these dreams and the baby that they never got to know, it is a real child. So I'm not sure if it's so much a question, or just like if you could address either the women themselves that are grieving from the loss of the unborn child, or everyone else, how they can and should react and help them understand that it is a real loss to these people as well.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and I'm sorry for your loss. And it's not there's a great organization, Kanafayim. I just want to say that deals with that. I think, I've had clients who've experienced that, and I could tell you that the pain is unbearable. For to go through that, and this is what it sort of falls in line with what I said earlier. I mean, you expressed it so beautifully. This is a real loss, and the women who go through it, it's so painful and so hard, and the idea that someone who has gone through a pregnancy, whether it's a partial pregnancy or a full pregnancy, and lost and had this pregnancy loss that is so painful, and it adds back to that point of giving people permission to feel. How saying move on, saying it didn't happen, it's so painful. It's something that you express it so beautifully. I wish people would understand that we don't get to decide for other people how deep that pain is. Some people have a pregnancy loss and it's not as painful for them. Some people have a pregnancy loss and it's tremendously painful for them. So the idea that a third party could decide for this mother who lost her pregnancy, it's like it breaks my heart. I mean, it's just so heartbreaking that they should experience that. I wish people, and I hope people hear the message that you just shared. I hope just this group even can understand that a loss of any sort, it's the individual's decision about how painful it is, so to speak, or how much it means to them, I'll say, and not anyone else's decision, right? I mean, the person could choose to have the pain or not. I didn't necessarily mean that, but I just meant that it's not someone else's choice to tell them that you shouldn't have this pain or you should have this pain. I think that's really, really unfair, and it just increases their pain. So you said it beautifully, and I hope people will take your message and keep it into practice.
Hey, Glenn, let's go further. We have so many more questions and a lot of live questions. I want to put a little speed on it, if that's okay. My father died 7 years ago. My mother since has always been depressed and not getting out of bed. She basically fell into a state of being lost and completely incapable of anything. While my father was alive, she was a very capable person. I've been doing all her stuff, such as taking care of everything and shopping for her, etc. But how could I help her move on and maybe even get remarried? She's only 57 years old.
Yeah. So I think, I'll go quickly for that question because I think we kind of addressed it. I think we sort of addressed that question. It's difficult as children to see our parents, or to see as parents to see our children not doing or going in the path that we want them to go. They're not proceeding in life. They're not moving on. They're not conducting their life the way they want them to. That's hard, especially for people we love. We want them to do what we think is best. And the challenge there is probably more for those kids to come to acceptance about where their mom is. I also think that these people who you're describing, I was asking the question, they're looking at their mother and they're deciding what the relationship meant to them. And they don't know what it was. They don't know how their mom looked at their dad. They don't know what the loss of that relationship meant. Like I shared earlier, there's meaning in that loss. And there's dual meaning. It's not just, or multiple meanings. It's not just the loss of her husband. It's what that relationship meant to her. Maybe he was behind the scenes. He was the wind beneath her wings. So I think the challenge there is more about supporting her. I think to the degree that they could support her and let her have her feelings and talk about the dad and talk about the loss, that probably have a better chance of helping her to process the pain of what she's going through versus trying to change her.
I want to ask another question. Interesting. It's coming from a widower. I lost my wife a few years ago, and I'm still just processing it. I'm getting comments from my kids and friends, going to therapy, get remarried. Move on already. I'm making it worse. I'm just sitting in the depression. They're just not understanding me. How do I explain to them? Just leave me alone. Let me grieve.
Yeah. So, this is the same question. He's on the other side of this question. He's looking for people to understand him. People don't understand how much pain he is. And much like we described, this thing's full of, you start to see these patterns that a person who's experiencing this level of pain, this level of loss, and the world is telling them to grieve. You see from the question how much pain they're in. They see how hard it is for them. And to the degree that the people around them would support him and try to let him have his pain to the degree that they're capable of that. I think you'll find that there'll be more people who are able to move on from that than trying to. It's almost like counterproductive. The more they're pushing him to take a different step, to move in a different direction, the more depressed he's getting, the more frustrated he's getting, the more isolated, the more alone he's getting, and the more that happens, it's probably the less chance that he's going to go and take a different step. They're just pushing him further into isolation, and that's super painful.
Okay, let's put on a live question. You're on.
Me?
Yeah, you're on. Hi.
Okay, yes. Okay. Thanks. You may have mentioned this already. I'm sorry for any repetition. I came in late. I just got back from work. But I was wondering, with the depression, often there's like an accompanying anger. I don't know if you discussed this, but I find various, at least in my own experiences, there were several types of anger. There might have been anger, like you lose a loved one and you had a lot of unresolved issues. I know, unfortunately, I went through that with my mother. Sometimes you can have a situation you're just, I don't know, say angry at the world. Maybe somebody, God forbid, got killed by a drunk driver. You can get angry, be angry at the driver. I mean, do we have a right to be that angry? I should put it that way. Or even what happened recently in Maron. I went through the initial grief and shock like everyone else, but then I thought, well, where was the crowd control? What happened? I mean, I personally don't have any relatives. I mean, who are who were there, but but I'm just wondering if these people that are grieving. I mean, at what point do you have? I mean, is the anger justified, or how do you deal with that kind of how do you deal with that kind of?
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so that's a great question. That's a great question. And obviously, I just want to first, I'm sorry for the loss of your mom. I'm sorry for that. And I wanted to just share, anger is one of the stages of grief. It's very common. It's very normal for people to feel anger. That's the idea of the stages. It's to say these are typical. The idea of the stages is not that they're linear steps. It's just that these are the types of common reactions that people have, and anger is a very common one. When you think of it, the idea, if you look at again these stages and you think of which is a more manageable emotion, the emotion of sadness, the emotion of feeling permanent loss, the emotion of feeling like they're never coming back, is that if you take that on one hand, which is a more powerful or stronger, a more empowering emotion? When you look at a bear, right? When a person's in a forest, and they see a bear. So I learned this once, that what you do when you see a bear is you're supposed to raise your hands all the way above your head, as high up, stand on your tippy toes and raise your hands above your head. And that's very intimidating to a bear. Bear looks at that and he says, this is some big creature, I got to run away. Anger makes us feel powerful. Anger makes us feel in control. Sadness is sort of like a precursor to acceptance. That's the sort of the sadness piece, what I call depression or sadness piece. It's like I've kind of come to a place where I see that I don't have control, and that's kind of the range that you tend to see with the stages of grief, is from a place of feeling control. Like denial is a sense of control. I'm actually controlling the reality. Bargaining, anger, these are all efforts to control the situation, to try to change what's there, to control the environment. And the further side of the other spectrum is acceptance. It's recognizing that we don't have a sense of control of the situation, that we are sad. The sadness comes from kind of that recognition that we don't have it. So, and then there's, so the fifth one, we talked about meaning. The sixth one, which is meaning, which we sort of take control again of our lives in a different way. We manage the relationship in a different way, in a meaningful way. So what I think, so my response is that anger is very normal. It's very typical, and it's okay. I think when we get bad news, it's common. Yes, they have a right to be angry. Of course they have a right to be angry. Everyone has a right to their feelings. You have a right to feel what it is. And the idea that you can be angry at whatever authority that was supposed to be responsible for the safety of the individuals, that's normal. It's a sense of control, because if we can fix that, then we're safe. If we can fix the crowd control issue, then the world is a safer world than if we recognize that imagine accepting this was a tragic accident. I'm not saying we shouldn't fix the problem. That's not my point. I'm not a crowd control person. I would never suggest that we shouldn't make things better. I'm just saying that if we were to accept for a moment that sometimes, no matter, despite our best efforts, tragic things happen, that's a scarier place to be. That's in a certain way more difficult. So anger, yes, you have the right. And two, it's besides that it's common, it's something we expect and something that we allow people to have. And we also recognize it for what it is.
Very good. I have a question for a person that has a loss, and the other way, he doesn't want to feel the emotions because it's too hard. So they keep being busy and trying to continue because it's too hard. And then when they, I don't know, after a while, they just break down and they don't want to feel it.
Yeah. It's okay. My approach generally to these things is that whatever works. My clients will always hear me say that. People on Mayrim will hear me say, whatever works. So people say, I'm in denial. I had someone recently tell me they had a loss and it was very traumatic to them. And they said, I can't accept it. I said, okay, don't. Why do you have to accept it right away? That's your system saying, I'm not ready to accept it. I think what happens to some people is that, and there's a fear of this, that if I don't address it at all, one time it's gonna kind of like hit me like it's gonna hit me much later on in a way I won't be able to control it. I think that to the degree that we can be self-aware of our emotions, be aware of how things feel and how we feel and how we're reacting to things, I think that to the degree that we can sort of take grief and manage it in chunks, right? Manageable chunks, right? So we could, and something that requires a third party, that requires professional help to be able to, a lot of the work that I do, I do a lot of EMDR work, and a lot of the work that I do is helping people to manage, process emotion, process trauma in a way that's manageable, that we you got the 3-gallon bucket, 10 gallons of water. It's like, okay, we're gonna add on a little bit. We could take a little bit more. We'll add on to the bucket. We'll take a little more water. Add on, add a couple more. Increase the capacity, increase the tools, and add a little more. So the degree that you can do that, that's okay. I think that sometimes that's the best they can do because we need to survive. So there's like almost like this pressure the other way. You got to feel it. You got to get into it. You got to accept it. And we try to pressure people to feel it. It happens with kids when kids suffer. We see this a lot with kids who, when there's a loss, child loss, and so the siblings don't want to go to therapy because they just want to have, like like Usher's question earlier. They just want a normal life. They don't want to work with it. And the parents, and I hear this all the time. We got to get them to therapy. We got to push them, and it backfires. We have to let people have their process. And sometimes that's them not dealing with it is the best that the system can do. And the system is saying, let's survive. Let me get back to reality. Let me get back to real life. So sometimes the best you could do is look for signs later on. At some point, if it's going to catch up with them, if you can catch it early enough and say, I'm starting to notice so-and-so, either about a kid or about yourself. I'm starting to notice it's affecting you in a difficult way. So then maybe it's time to add tools to the toolbox, see professional help, whatever it is, deal with it, talk about it. So I think that's kind of how I approach that particular question.
Okay, we have some live questions, Glenn. Let's get to it. Okay, you're on.
Me?
You.
Okay, first of all, I would just like to comment that what you said about not forcing kids into therapy, which I thought was a really great idea, because I think conventional idea is that if a kid goes through some kind of trauma, you have to force them into therapy. At least that used to be my idea. So that was very enlightening. Number one. The question that I had, I don't know if this is an anxiety issue or not. How do you deal with the fear of loss? Not God forbid that you had the loss. Let's say, for example, my mother is elderly. She should live and be well. And I'm an only daughter and I live far away from her. The fear, God forbid, of losing her, which God forbid if Mashiach doesn't come soon, is something that, is on my mind. And it's very, very scary. Or even, the situation with, what happened in Meron, sending your children to Eretz Yisrael. Now, we know that the person could walk out into the street and, God forbid, get hit by a car. But the fear of loss, of like when you have other people that have lost and you're afraid, it may happen to me. It may happen to my child. It may happen to my parent. How do you deal with that fear, or is that anxiety, whatever it is? But
yeah, okay, great question. First of all, your mom should, for Shalema, she should live 120, and she should be healthy, and you shouldn't suffer any loss or any difficulty. It's a very common theme, and it makes sense. So the first thing is it anxiety, or is it like, almost I hear like, is it anxiety or is it legitimate? So I think, going back to the earlier comment I made about there is a great inclination to pathologize everything. It's normal that someone who suffered a loss, it's normal. This is the way that the body was made. This is the way God made our system, that when we experience it learns, it evolves, it adapts. Okay. So someone who's walking down the street, God forbid, gets mugged, and then their system has some anxiety around walking down the street. So first of all, we have to acknowledge that the system's trying to help us. It's learning. It's recognizing that the world is not as safe as we thought it was. So I think that there's a part of that is just, acknowledging that our system's trying to help us, to look at our system not as an enemy. Our anxiety is not our enemy. In that case, it's trying to be your friend. Now, sometimes we get our internal system gets uncalibrated, as I say, and that's when the anxiety, as you call it, is unhelpful, and it takes us to a place we're not able to function. Okay, sometimes the idea that that anxiety is our friend, and perhaps if someone has suffered a loss and then they're afraid of suffering another loss, it might lead them to better things. The anxiety might say, well, I'm going to make the best out of a time I have with my parent. They might use that anxiety, recognizing it as a kind of a sign to make that relationship more meaningful, or to be more careful. And I think what happens is that there's a balance in life. The balance in life is that idea of being safe and being also taking risk. Because if we're too concerned with being safe, like people who stay in the house all the time, right? There's some people who have a phobia and they'll stay in the house all the time. And those people suffer quite a bit because they're not calibrated or balanced in the way that they can say, I recognize that the world is not as safe as I wish it were, but I also know that if I don't take certain risks in life, certain calculated risks, then I'm going to be losing out on a lot. So someone might say, well, the fear of losing a parent means I'm going to sort of disassociate myself from that parent and have nothing to do with them because I can't deal with the loss. Another person might say, well, the anxiety around losing this parent means I'm going to spend more time with my parent. I'm never going to leave a conversation without saying I love you. Or I'm going to do things that my parent enjoys. I'm going to spend that time with them and take them on trips and so on and so forth. So it's kind of about, one, finding balance, and two, trying to harness whatever that anxiety friend is trying to tell us in a positive way. If it becomes unmanageable in our daily life, where, like I said, a person disassociates from the parent, or they are so consumed by the anxiety that they can't function in certain ways. So it goes back to that earlier point. That's when we start to look at maybe some external help might be worthwhile to look at.
Well, thank you, Glenn. Let's go to another live question. You're on.
Okay. I lost my mother 1.5 years ago. I was one of the POAs, and when she was dying, I had to deal with every Fessionin and the doctor, 20 doctors alone. Not only that, but my 4 siblings don't really miss her like I do. Only one brother thanked me for keeping her alive so long. And the rest of my siblings were just happy to get her money. Now I'm cleaning out her house alone also. It's very sad and taxing. How do I deal with it all?
Yeah. Oh, well, I hear in your voice the pain, the pain of, I'm sorry for your loss. And there's such a, you can hear in your voice and what how much you're going through. And it's so much harder because it's like no one else cares. You're carrying it alone, which makes it so much more difficult. When there's people involved, when a couple loses a child, or the siblings who lose a parent, or children child siblings lose a parent, and they're able to kind of support each other. Everybody's together in the loss. We're carrying it together, so it makes it more manageable. And for you, not only is there a sense that you're alone, but it's also there's an invalidation of the pain that you're feeling. And there's an invalidation of the effort that you made to keep her alive and to keep her happy and functioning. So that's also painful because you invested so much in that relationship, and it's like no one's acknowledging it. So I think one of the things that could be helpful is and this is tough. Sometimes it's tough to do it alone, and sometimes it's all you got. So recognizing for yourself, allowing yourself, giving yourself permission to have the pain, giving yourself permission to feel that loss and feel that sense of loss because your mom's not with you in that way. And the grief can be debilitating. The 6th stage, I just wanted to bring that out because I think it might be one of the challenges, the great challenge that we have, and we see that with some of the questions that were asked tonight, is that people are kind of stuck with this conundrum. If I forget my mom, in your case, if you forget the person who you lost, so then there's a big advantage that you don't feel the pain, but the relationship's gone. And if you remember the pain, so the big advantage is that you have the relationship, but the big disadvantage is you have the pain. The stage of the 6th stage, as David Kessler calls it, and it's a big part of my practice, is finding other ways, finding meaningful ways to maintain the relationship between your mother and you, to find meaning in that loss, in what you did. And if you could find other ways to find meaning, it kind of helps to build a relationship, even though your mom is not with us in the physical sense, but it still builds that connection to her essence. Now, I think the first step would be to allow yourself to even though, and this is so hard, even though other people in your family are not appreciating not just what you did, but they're not appreciating what you lost. It's recognizing for yourself that what you did was incredible. How much harder is that? It's so much more difficult that you did it alone. You didn't let your spouses influence you. You didn't let the people in your life change what you were doing. You didn't let them change how you're feeling. So I think that's really incredible. Everything you did for your mom makes it that much more amazing because you did it alone. And I think the other part of it is that try to find ways to connect to your mother's essence. Try to find ways to connect to who she was and what was important to her. For me, Mayrim is a part of that. Being part of Mayrim is I know that my daughter Miriam, this is what her life's mission, she made it her life's mission. And so when I'm involved in Mayrim, then I know that I'm connecting to her. So it doesn't completely obliterate the pain, remove the pain, but allows me to have another aspect of connection to her that isn't purely based on pain. And that allows, it sort of gives us permission to not always have to feel the sting. So I think that's something that you might consider. And I give you a tremendous amount of credit for doing this alone. If you could find other people in your life who were connected to your mom, I don't know if you had siblings or who the other people were in your family. If you could connect to them about your mom, maybe that would be, valuable to you or helpful to you or supportive to you.
Glenn, I got a few versions of this question. I'm just going to punch you in the face. Ready? I know, Mr. Holman, you're not a rabbi, but how do I lose a child and still believe that Hashem loves us, or b'chlal believe in Hashem? Period.
Okay, so now I'm getting all the easy, all the easy questions. Okay. One, this is the same question, like, we talked about, people said about Meron and the Holocaust and all the other losses and the pain. So one thing that I could say is that people, Moshe Rabbeinu asked Hashem, Tzaddik v'ralo, why do good people suffer? And he didn't get an answer. So I don't think any of us are going to figure the answer out if Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have it. So one, I think it's an unanswerable question in this world. I think for whatever reason, God has put us in a situation where that question is unanswered. Two, I think whenever we suffer a significant loss, like a child loss, there's a certain part of every single action that we do that's lishma. Because every time you daven, I'm davening to you even though you took my child, or you took my husband, you took my parent. I think there's truth in every single time we do a mitzvah, every time we do something, a dvar tov, it's always, we're doing this even though. So there's an aspect of lishma in everything we do. People who don't have emunah, people who don't have bitachon, they don't have Yiddishkeit, they don't have Hashem, I think they tend to suffer more than people who don't. And the problem with this question, or the difficulty in this question, is because we're stuck in another one of these conundrums, which is, I believe in God, then I don't understand how a God could take away my child, or take away my spouse, or take away my parent. And if I don't believe in God, then I'm stuck in a world that's chaotic, that has no meaning, that has no purpose, no structure. So we're stuck kind of in this scenario of not really knowing which way to turn. The only thing that maybe will give some people some solace is the idea. And people ask me this: how do you do it? How do you and your wife do it? How do other people in the Mayrim do it? How do people who have suffered other losses do it? And what I think in my head, this is not part of my practice per se, but it's what I think in my head sometimes, right? Is that people say that God doesn't give you more than you can handle. It's such a concept. And I told a rabbi once that there's a certain kafir in that. There's a certain sense in that that's apikorsis. Because it suggests that there's such an idea that a person has a limited capacity, and God looks at a person and says, okay, you have a limited capacity, and therefore I can't give you more than you can handle. But the truth is that God really works the other way around. God recognizes nisyonos, difficulties. And this is just what works for me. I'm not saying this is absolute. I'm just telling you what helps me sleep at night. So everyone has their own way of dealing with these things. The idea is that a person is given the capacity they need to deal with the nisyonos. And I think you see that, right? Sometimes you'll see a person who has a difficulty and you can't imagine, how are they able to do it? How is this person capable of handling this situation? I could never handle that situation. And that could be true for someone who has a seemingly worse or seemingly better nisyonos. Hashem, I believe that Hashem gives a person a capacity to handle what they have to handle. And that's one aspect. The second thing is that imonochi b'tzara, this idea that no matter how bad your situation is, it could always be worse. And I don't mean that in the way people normally mean it, like, so you should appreciate the pain. I don't mean that. I mean that if God wanted to make it, all God wanted to do was inflict pain on you, he would make it worse. So it must be that God has a certain cheshbon in the things he gives, in the siyanis he gives. And therefore, there must be something, there must be some calculation, there must be some love. There are other areas of emunah, there are other areas of understanding about this. But as you look to God, I think the idea, just to summarize, the idea that we're going to understand why he does the things that he does, I don't think that, I certainly don't have the answer to that. I don't think any of us human beings have the answer to that. I think it's one of the things that we wait from Mashiach, and we understand that. And I think we could hope that we could see that we could find the positives in what Hashem does, and the purpose of that is to help us believe that this is not to hurt us. This is part of a cheshbon of what Hashem does. So I don't know if that works for everybody. I'm sure it doesn't. And I'm not saying that it needs to. I'm just saying it's something that sometimes I think about, and those type of things are helpful to me.
Okay. This is a question of someone. I said, I lost my father 2 years ago, and I actually have moved on. But that bothers me. I feel like I'm forgetting him. How do I hold on to the feeling? And I guess I shouldn't feel bad of the way I feel.
Yeah. So we addressed that a little bit. I think there's a great sense that people have that if I move on, is a betrayal to the person who they've lost. It's a very common thing, a theme. People, sometimes they hold on to the pain. They hold on to that difficulty, because to move on and be happy with my life, you see it with all different types of losses, not just, certainly that's a complication when someone is married and they lost their spouse and they marry a new spouse. That's true. But it's true even other type of losses. I just lost this parent, and how could I go and get on with my life? How could I feel good? So I think one of the things, they talk about as a betrayal. I think one of the things that makes that potentially easier or easier to understand is to try to look at, like, what would that person want? Would this person who we lost, would they want me to be stuck in it? Would they want me to not move on? Would they want me to be unhappy? So that's one thing that it's helpful to some people, although not to everyone. I think that the other aspect to that is allowing yourself that we're in this world. We're the ones here. We owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to the people in our lives here, and also the people we've lost. That if we decide that we want to move on, and we're ready for that, so we have to give ourselves permission to say that's where we are in life. And the last thing that helps with that is what I talked about, that sixth stage of meaning. When you connect to them in other ways, so then it's okay to move on and keep the relationship. If you can find new ways to keep the relationship going, even after the loss, then it allows us to move on and not have to feel that stinging pain. And I think it goes back to that same fundamental that we have to give other people permission to feel what they feel, and we have to give ourselves permission to feel what we feel. If we're ready to move on, we have to look at ourselves and say, I give myself permission to move on, because that's where I'm at, that's what I need. And that's the greatest gift we can give to ourselves and to the person we lost.
Wow, Glenn, too powerful. I'm gonna ask you the last question. Somebody says, instead of saying move on, I learned to live on. This concept is helpful. Just thought you might want to share that.
I love it. Yeah, the best. That's
okay, I'm
great.
gonna ask you the last question, and then we're gonna go to closing, if that's okay?
Yeah.
Last question is coming from a friend of yours that knows you for 30 years. He called me today. He said, I should ask you a question and not use his name. He says, he knows you for 30 years. He knows everything about your life. He davens with you in shul. He says he wants to know what's the magic secret, how he sees you go through this, you and your wife, and not only you go through it and you've went through nisyonos that are unimaginable, but you do it b'simcha and b'ahava, and you're smiling and you're happy, and you're like, he doesn't know how you do it. He wants to know where he could buy the recipe.
I think it goes back to, I didn't realize I was doing such a great job, but thank you. And I think that there's 2 points to it. One, everyone struggles. Everybody's struggling. There's a constant need to grow, and there's a constant desire to become better. And there's no magic recipe. It's just my family. We want to get better. We use our nisyonos, like I described with anxiety, and we say we're going to use that to propel us to do good things, and that provides meaning in our lives. And I think at the end of the day, even though everyone struggles, we struggle. I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that for me, the way I understand it is that Hashem gives a certain capacity to people, that whatever Nisayan they're going to go through, that Hashem's going to give you some kind of tools to be able to handle it in a way that someone who doesn't have the Nisayan, Hashem doesn't give them the tools. There's no purpose to them. So that's what I believe. I don't know any other way to answer that question, but I hope that's just the way I perceive it or approach it.
Wow. Whew. Okay, let's go to closing. Again, I want to first thank Glen Holman for coming on tonight and being mechazik so much of us. There was literally thousands of people that came here tonight, and I'm sure thousands will watch it. And chizik and inspiration and good down-to-earth advice. And really, really thank you again, Glenn. Appreciate it. Again, if anybody came the first time, we have the share every Sunday night at 10 o'clock. It's the same Zoom ID. Please come and let everybody know about the share. Next Sunday, 5/9, we're going to have an amazing program with the one who did our first year, a good friend of me and Menachem's, Mordechai Weinberger. We're discussing dealing with difficult people, family members, personality disorders. I'm sure we could all relate to this topic, and it's going to be an amazing program. So please come, and it should be amazing. Again, tonight's share was learned L'schus Lias Neshama for Glenn's two daughters, Nechama Liba Bas Zelik Shal, Miriam Bas Zelik Shal, my father-in-law's yard side Monday night, Tovia Ben Baruch and my mother, Penina Parabas Rabiel Tzvi, and anybody who could donate to meirim.com, it's MAYRIM, right? Please go to the website. You know, it's Glenn's organization. Glenn is an amazing person, inspiring and helping so many people in the trenches, as we could say it. Again, everything is recorded tonight. It's going to be on menachembernfeld.com. Any questions, please email coachmenachem@gmail.com. Glenn, do you want to give out your email address? People are texting me. They want to know how they can contact you.
Holman Therapy, it's HOLMAN Therapy @gmail.com.
Okay. So anybody who wants to reach out to Glenn personally, please reach out to him. If you need any advice or anything, just reach out to him. He's there for you. Again, I want to thank, again, tonight's share is number 53, and it's all recorded. If you want to call tomorrow, I'll be on the phone number 848-777-GROW. I want to thank all our advertising sponsors, Lakewood Scoop, Rabbi and Aniv from Chazak, Chayla Kaplan and Shmuel Summer from JCN. And again, Glenn, really amazing. And let's go to closing. Coach Menachem, wrap it up.
I want to thank you, Glenn. I think tonight it was a real vulnerable discussion. Again, talking about emotions, for many people is hard. And just to feel those emotions can be very painful. And you got to be vulnerable for that. And like we heard, the theme all across, to give yourself permission to feel whatever you feel. Interesting. If you feel you have to continue, you can't stop. I guess as of now, that's where you are. And if you need to do this, you need to feel this, and you feel that, whatever it is, this is how you feel. So I guess if that's the way you feel, then that's the way you feel. Just to give ourselves permission is very, very, very powerful. And then, like we heard, to create that space that sometimes we just don't understand. And I think in these times that everybody, whoever has that painful feelings, whatever it is, the negative emotions, or I wouldn't say negative, just the emotions, whatever emotions they have is, and now with Klal Yisrael, whatever is going on, whatever you feel, we don't understand. We just don't. And this is the time, I believe this is the time that we have to hold on strong with Emunah and B'tachon, and this is where we look up to Hashem, and He's running His world, and we just sometimes don't understand. And we don't always like it. And then we see some people have questions. And I guess this is part of it. The feelings, the questions, just you got to accept and give yourself permission. So thank you very much for that. And Hashem, hopefully everybody can take out the chizik that they needed for their individual personal life.
Thank you, Coach Menachem. Beautiful. Glenn, Harav Glenn, Rabbi Glenn, please give us some divrei chizik, something to go home with, something to go to sleep with.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to just, I talked a lot about this 6-stage meaning. And it's a very important part, of my life, of my practice. I want to give you a good example. When my daughter Miriam was in the hospital, she was on ECMO, every machine in the book she was on. And one of the things she was that she struggled with was being in the hospital. She didn't have a chance to feel Shabbos. She was in a hospital gown that was not, it was all machines. It was hard to feel Shabbos. So my son, he decided that he's going to make a gown for her. He bought a dress. He's in fashion, and he reconstructed the dress into a hospital gown. It was a beautiful, beautiful dress. And so she stood there. She looked like with her hair done. We bought her something like with ECMO. I don't know if you know what ECMO is, but all kinds of machines connected and tubes. And she's sitting there in a Shabbos dress. It was very meaningful. Talk about meaning. After she passed away, my son has been working for quite a long time, and he very creative person, and he built hospital gowns. He reconstructed and designed hospital gowns that look like dresses, they look like jerseys, they're gorgeous, beautiful things. Called heel, because slippers, so HEEL, it's called heel. And I think the website is working on it. So the idea is that this way, what he wants to do is he wants to give out to kids and to teen girls and teen boys, whatever, all teens. He wants to give them out gowns. They shouldn't feel like in these uncomfortable, it's brilliant the way it's made, uncomfortable gowns. The idea is that's, for him, that's the way he made meaning. That's how he found a way to connect to Miriam, through the gowns. And that's really one of the things that's helped me a lot, is finding ways to find meaning, that the relationship is not just limited to the pain, but it also could be something that mattered. So he knew this would matter to her, so he did that. And that's he used the word heel, H-E-E-L, heel gowns, but it's heal, right? He's helping the people to heal. So not only is it helping the people to heal, the kids, kids will be happy, I mean, they're gorgeous, they're beautiful gowns, but also, and comfortable, but also it's healing for him. This is the way he sort of goes with the loss. This is the way he carries the loss. This is the way he brings meaning to the loss. So I think one of the things that's helpful is whenever someone loses someone, it's to look at their essence. What was important to them? What mattered to them? Who were they? And if you could figure that out, and then you could find something that's connected to that. That's another way to create that connection, to create that relationship, even though they're not here. But it's to bring them into this world. It's to bring their essence into this world. And I think that's something that is so powerful, and it's so necessary, especially in today's times, to bring meaning. So I wish everyone should know only simcha, should never have any tsar, shouldn't have any pain, shouldn't have loss. And those who have suffered loss, Hashem should help you to find ways, a path forward. As someone just said, to live on, not just move on, but live on. So beautifully put. And that, in Mitzvah Hashem, we should see Mashiach. I was at a Sefer Torah today. Someone wrote a Sefer Torah for the child who they lost. And I was standing next to them and they were singing the Ani Mamim, and the Mashiach should come. And that's what we wish for. So we should all be reunited with the people we lost. Thank you so much, Usher and Menachem, for giving me this opportunity. And we shall only share some closing.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Glenn, for coming. Thank you, everybody, for coming here tonight. We'll see you next week, Sunday night, 10 p.m., same time, same place. Glenn, I love you.
Thank you.